It's Mrs. Johnson today. We have been looking at angles and lines, and so today we're going to take it a little bit further and we're going to measure those angles, whether they are within shapes or just by themselves. So, when we were measuring length before, you would use a ruler or a centimeter ruler or inch ruler. Now we're going to use what's called a protractor, and I know that's hard for you at home, especially if you don't have one. So I am going to show you how you measure angles with a protractor, and that should help you a little bit. And then you're going to measure based on a protractor already being there. So if we take a look at this page here, it says underneath the arrow, a protractor is a tool used to measure angles. The length of the rays does not affect the measure of the angle. So how long a ray is not going to change the angle. You're just measuring that space from one ray to the other, okay? So there are steps that we need to follow. And the first one is you're going to line up that protractor. And to line it up, you're going to place the center of the protractor on the end point of the angle. So that's where the vertex is of your angle, with a straight edge along one ray. So you just choose one. The other one will then give you your amount. So a lot of protractors will have a little circle in the middle, and you're going to line the dot or the vertex of your angle right up with that center. So you can see on this protractor right here, it has the center or that dot located right there. And you're going to place it directly on that end point of the angle. Okay, so after doing so, the second step once you line it up, as you look on this part right here, is you are going to see that they've lined it up, but then they also lined up, there's a line on your protractor at the bottom that you're going to line one of the rays up with, okay? So step 2 is line up the angle. Line up one ray of the angle with the 0 on the protractor. So that line on the bottom is going to line up with the 0 on the side, okay? After you do that, you're going to move to step 3. You're going to measure the angle by looking at the other ray. So find the tick mark on the protractor that aligns with the second ray of the angle. So, and I know it's really hard to see on this one, but when you line it up right here, you can see then where that falls. Now, because this page is so small on the screen, it makes it really hard to see. But I also want you to think about a few other things before you line this up, because I have a lot of kids, when they go to line it up, they're like, oh, I could see what that is, and this is the answer because that's the number it lands on. Great, but you also have to talk to yourself about what kind of angle is this by itself. So when you look at this angle all alone, you have to ask yourself, is it an acute, a right, or an obtuse angle? Because that's going to matter when you go to look at the numbers on your protractor. And in this case, this is an acute angle, right? That means it's smaller or less than 90 degrees. And when we look at this bottom example down here, the 90 degrees is at the very, very top or center point of that protractor. And you can see that our angle did not go that far. And you can tell that by the numbers in the middle, they decrease or increase by 10. So if we're at 90 and we're going to go down 2 number spaces, that would be 80, now 70, which is what they gave to us right there. But that's kind of how you look at it. So always ask yourself, what kind of angle is it? Acute, right, or obtuse? And that will help you in measuring your angles. Okay, so we're going to go now to this next one. This next angle here, there is no measurement to it, and we're going to use the protractor that I have on the screen to measure this angle. So first, again, ask yourself, is it acute, right, or obtuse? And in this case, this one is obtuse. That means it's larger than 90, but less than a straight line. Okay, so step 1 says to line up the angles. So I'm going to drag this up by putting the center in the middle. And remember, when we talked about lining up the angles, it's not just about putting that center spot right on the vertex. It's also important that we line up that line. Okay, so now I've lined up a little bit. I'm going to get it more accurate here. Lined up that line right up to the ray of the angle. Okay, my dot's still not perfect, but we're getting there. Okay, then from here, we're going to line up that angle, which we did. And step 3, now we're going to measure the angle. Now, this tool is kind of awesome because I can click on it and get this arrow. Ooh. And of course, I've got to get off my pen, but I can swing that around and line it right up with this other one. Okay. And in that case, it's pretty close between 125 and 130. And let me explain that. So we talked about it being obtuse, so we know it's more than 90. And remember, 90 degrees was right here at the top. Let me get my pen back. It's right here at the top. Now it's going to click just on the protractor. And then now when you're going down this side to the left of 90, because we know we're dealing with an obtuse angle, it's going to be more than 90. I'm not going to look at these little numbers up here on the top of our protractor. I'm going to use the larger numbers because it is an obtuse angle. Otherwise, where this lies would be between 50 and 55. And I know the angle of a 50 and 55 angle would be an acute angle, and that's not what this one is. So the reason why they show both on either side of your 90 is because what if you have an angle where you line up your ray on one side over here and you're measuring then the opposite side, which you'll see some today and next week with this. But that's why they have both the larger numbers and smaller numbers on either side of your protractor. And that's where a lot of people get confused on what the angle is. So the most important thing to ask yourself is, what type of angle is it? We know it's obtuse, so we know we're using the larger numbers. Okay, so when we go here again, here is our line. Well, 130 puts us about right here, and 125 puts us about right there. So you can see that we are actually closer to 125 degrees. And to write a degree sign, you make just this little circle in the air. And please don't make it a 0, because otherwise that's 1,205 degrees or whatever number you're dealing with, but not a degree sign. A degree sign is super small and it hangs up in the air. Okay? So now we're going to look at some more angles, and I am going to bring this protractor down with me. Okay, so we're going to use this protractor same way to measure some other angles. And I'm not going to do all of these because, again, you're not going to be able to use a protractor on your own. You are going to be given a protractor, and then you're going to have to look at the angles. It's just too hard for us to do this way online. Okay, so we're going to line it up, but you can see I don't have my ray lined up, so I'm going to have to swivel that around. Really got to work hard to get that right in the center of my vertex there. Okay, now I'm going to use this tool to line this one up so we can really see what we're dealing with. And I hope you were asking yourself, first of all, what kind of angle was this? So I'm going to take it off. Woo! I'm going to take this protractor off. Now you might be thinking this could be close to a few different angles. It could be more than 90, but it could also be less than 90, right? I always take like a sticky note or a piece of paper, and I'm going to use this card. And I know you're not going to see this, but if I line it up right in the middle, I should be able to see both lines. And if you were to do that, you would see that that does not work. So that means that this angle is larger than 90. Okay. So if it's larger than 90, that makes it what kind of angle? You're right, it makes it obtuse. Okay, so this is an obtuse angle, so we're going to be looking at the larger number. So when we look at this, I'm not 100% perfect on here, so I want to really get that lined up. I'm going to back this up a little bit. Whew. I am so close to this spot right here, 100 or 80. So think to yourself, if this is an obtuse angle, meaning more than 90, would I go 80 or would I go 100? So you're right, you would go with 100 because that's obtuse. So write the amount and put a little circle at the top to show degree. Okay? All right, before we go on to number 2, ask yourself, what kind of angle does that look like? Acute, right, or obtuse? You're right. I think that one looks like an acute, but because now it's way up in the air, I have to move this protractor around. So I'm still going to line up my vertice with that dot. So if I've done that, perfect, right there. But if you notice, neither one of my lines are lined up with 0. So I now need to move my protractor one way or the other. It doesn't matter which one I line up with because I'm going to wind up getting the exact same angle as long as I line one of them up with 0. So there we go. Okay, so I'm dealing with acute, so I know I'm looking at the smaller numbers. So here's, you can see I'm not right smack in the center yet. I'm getting there, huh? There we go. So about right there. And I know it's covered up this line, which is good because then we know which one's in the middle. So if this was, I'm taking the larger numbers, if I was, that would be 100. What lies between 100 and 110 would be 105. Or would it be a smaller acute angle where I'm between 80 and 70 or 75? So that's where that first question is super important. Is it acute, right, or obtuse? And in this case, it is acute. So we're dealing with the smaller numbers. So 80, between 80 and 70 is 75. So the answer to this angle is 75 degrees. Now those were just plain angles. What if you had an angle in a shape? Okay, such as this one right here in this triangle shape. Well, we're still going to do it the same way. And I like that this one's totally upside down because I really have to line up my angles. So I'm going to have to move some of this around. So give me a second. So I'm going to flip it almost all the way upside down. There, I've lined that up, but neither one of my lines are on 0, huh? So now I need to swivel it this way. And again, it doesn't matter which line you line up, as long as you ask yourself, what kind of angle is this, so you know which numbers you're working with. Okay, so there is my vertex. Swivel it this way a little bit. It's being kind of picky on me right now. It's too much or not enough, I guess. Okay, maybe if I drag this, it'll be a little bit more friendly. Boy, it just does not like me right now. Well, we could get a good estimate on this. So this angle up here that I'm measuring, is that acute, right, or obtuse? It's important to know, isn't it? Because that means, okay, am I dealing with the low number right here or the high number up here?